The slaver ship Vortax Glory drifted through the quiet dark of the El Tari Rim, humming with arrogance and low-frequency engine grumble. Its hull bore centuries of rust and ego, a patchwork of stolen insignias from dozens of dead civilizations. Inside, a crew of galactic predators lounged and bickered like noble jackals on a silver throne, their pride only outshone by their laziness. The captain, a 9-foot, beetleback creature named Krelvik, leaned back in his iron bone chair, mandibles twitching with boredom. His 4 eyes scanned the ship's NAV feed, the only light in the dark bridge. Slavers didn't need to be fast, just opportunistic. And the galaxy, as always, offered opportunity. Got something, mumbled the sensor tech, a furry Marnik with poor posture and an obsessive relationship with sweet protein paste. Human distress beacon, unregistered, 1 planet over. System reads civilian. No weapons. Barely a pod. Human. Krelvik's eyes narrowed. A stray. Looks that way. Frontier-class shuttle. Probably broke atmosphere too fast. Krelvik made a guttural chuckle, a sound like a car crash inside a meat grinder. Get the tractor beam ready. Let's fish it in before someone else smells it. They expected fear, perhaps some tears, or desperate bargaining. Humans were known to beg beautifully when cornered. But when the hull doors hissed open and the boarding crew stepped in, what greeted them wasn't panic. It was tea. A woman sat calmly in a crash couch, one hand resting on her round belly, the other lifting a porcelain cup to her lips. Steam curled up. The scent of something floral and faintly earthy filled the stale ship air. She looked up, smiled. Oh, hello. Is this your ship? You might want to get the ventilation checked. Smells like spoiled onions and regret. The boarding party froze. 4 armed, multi-species slavers, one with a plasma whip still humming. None moved. The woman set her tea down gently. I'm Lena. Sorry for the mess. Gravity got a little dramatic during the landing. She gestured around. The shuttle's interior showed signs of impact, but otherwise it was strangely neat. Beside her sat a small boy, perhaps 4 years old, humming softly as he drew in a notebook with crayons. A reptilian crew member leaned toward the kid. You okay, small one? The boy looked up with calm brown eyes. My daddy says you shouldn't point plasma guns at people you want to keep breathing. The reptilian blinked. The whip guy muttered, check the cargo hold. There was nothing in the hold but tea supplies, a few clothes, prenatal vitamins, and a plush rabbit missing 1 ear. Back on the Vortax Glory, Krelvik watched the feed with squinting distaste. Where's the panic? Where's the screaming? Humans are supposed to scream. She asked for cookies, reported the boarding lead, rubbing one temple, and then offered us biscuits. Actual biscuits. Weapons. Krelvik snapped. No weapons. No crew. No defense system. Not even a distress countermeasure. Just her and the boy. The ship buzzed with amusement. The deckhands laughed. Slavers joked about how easy it had become. Maybe we sell her as a prophetess, snorted one. She seems like she knows things she shouldn't. Krelvik wasn't laughing. Something itched under his shell, a sensation he hadn't felt since the Kareen collapse. Dread. They brought the woman aboard. She walked calmly beside them, holding her son's hand. No shackles. No resistance. She commented politely on the rusting state of the ship's corridors and asked if the flickering lights were a design choice or a pending hazard. I get it, she said with a playful lilt. You want a ransom. Not a terrible business model, really, but I hope you have a decent comms relay. My husband can be hard to reach. Depends on which war zone he's cleaning up. You joke much, hissed a crew member. Only when I'm being kidnapped. She smiled. It's either that or cry, and crying gives me a headache. They put her in the holding cell, gave her food, which she sniffed suspiciously, then fed half to the child. The boy accepted it solemnly and began to hum again, a tune that sounded ancient and oddly familiar, something like a human lullaby. A tech named Greel later insisted that the AI began glitching as soon as the child started humming. Subtle at first, navigation stutters, logs deleting themselves, autopilot rerouting mid-course. Then odder things. doors opening without prompts, the ship lights flickering to the rhythm of the song. A coffee machine on Deck 3 exploded without cause. "She's too calm," Greel muttered, sitting in the data core chamber, watching the camera feed of Lena fixing her son's hair. "People don't act like that unless they're hiding something." Krelvik grunted. "Or they're insane." "No, sir. This feels calculated." Another tech, a nervous fish-eyed alien named Bolto, had started a search on the human database. He ran her biometric scan through every known human system, expecting nothing. Instead, he got red banners. Restricted profile. Clearance, ultra black. Civilian cover ID. Real name, Lena Thorne Mason. Affiliated status, spouse of Commander Grant Mason. Bolto blinked at the screen. He knew the name. Everyone who lived through the Dronos incident knew the name. The human strategist who'd shut down a pirate fleet using nothing but decoys, sabotage, and psychological warfare. The one who'd made 5 systems defect in a week without firing a shot. The same man whose unconfirmed war record included the term Civilization Reset Protocol. Bolto stood. He did not run. He floated with exaggerated calmness to the bridge, eyes wide. "Captain, we have a situation." Krelvik turned. "Unless she's secretly the Empress of Terra, I don't care." "Worse." Bolto transferred the file to the captain's chair. Krelvik stared. Then again. His jaw split slowly. "She's his." Greel laughed from behind. "That explains the humming." "What does the humming explain?" "It's a hack code, disguised as an Earth lullaby. I ran a snippet through the AI. It triggers system confusion loops. He's using a 4-year-old to destabilize our ship." Krelvik stood. "This is bait. We brought bait on board." "No signal left the ship," Greel said. "Not from us," Bolto replied. "But who knows what that kid has in his crayons?" Lena sat in the holding cell, sipping her tea, now brewed with spices someone on the crew had scavenged from a mess. She looked up as the guards passed. "Has anyone called my husband yet?" she asked cheerfully. "He gets quite upset when he doesn't get to do his rescue moment." Very theatrical, that one. A lizard-like crewman swallowed. "We're contacting him." "Oh, good. Just let me know when he's en route. I'll make sure the boy has his shoes on." The crew held an emergency meeting. Suggestions flew like sparks. "We jettison them into space." "Now." "No, we return them and apologize." "We fake a power failure and accidentally lose them." "We kill the AI. Take the data." "Are you mad? If we kill that kid and she is his wife, he'll make this ship part of the asteroid belt." "Maybe she's lying? You want to bet your life on that? Look at her. She offered me lavender tea and then asked how I'd like to be dismembered, in metaphorical terms." Krelvik sat silent, mandibles tapping rhythmically. The crew fell into uneasy silence. He turned toward the display. There, Lena had taken off her shoes and was sitting cross-legged with the boy, who now arranged crayons in color order like military units on a map. The boy whispered something to her. Lena smiled. She looked up, right at the camera, and winked. Outside, in the quiet of the Eltari Rim, a shadow moved. It did not broadcast signals. It did not shimmer like a ship should. It simply was, the way a predator is in the dark. Inside Vortax Glory, the child began to hum again. The lights dimmed, and Lena, in the holding cell, finished her tea with a sigh. "Well," she said, "showtime." The ship's artificial gravity flickered twice before stabilizing. In the silence that followed, a spoon spun slowly on the mess table, having been nudged by a non-existent breeze. Bolto watched it from across the room, his wide eyes reflecting the flickering lights above. He was supposed to be recalibrating the comm relay, but his fingers hovered over the console like a pianist who'd forgotten the tune mid-performance. Down in engineering, Greel stared at a diagnostics report that made less sense with every passing second. Systems were registering perfectly operational, yet nothing behaved like it should. The ship's navigation had auto-looped them back toward the sector they just left. Life support had rebalanced itself to human norms without any crew order. A coffee maker that no one claimed to have fixed was brewing again, Earth-style, vanilla roast. And the AI kept humming. It wasn't music, not officially, just a background data pattern, like a digital whisper that threaded itself into maintenance routines, door logs, power draws. A soft, cyclical pulse, subtle enough to be missed unless you knew what you were listening for. Greil only realized it was the same melody the boy had hummed when the internal PA started playing it back softly on loop. Krelvik's mandibles clicked in measured agitation as he reviewed the human file again. Lena Thorne Mason, civilian cover, linguistics expert, freelance diplomat, minor trade advisor. But beneath that, redacted entries. Timestamps leading back 15 years. Her name appeared in a casualty list from a war that had no survivors. Then 3 years later, in a confidential report regarding psychological warfare and civilian infiltration. What disturbed him most wasn't her identity. It was her proximity. She was just a few corridors away, smiling, pregnant, sipping tea, and reading a book she'd pulled from a pocket reader, feet tucked beneath her like she was waiting for a delayed flight. She didn't act like prey. She acted like she was at home. "We need to put her in stasis," muttered the security chief, a thick-jawed brute with breathing tubes implanted into his neck. "Cryo the kid too. If they're weapons or bait, we seal them in ice until we can dump them." "No," Krelvik said flatly. "Stasis might trigger a failsafe. These people, these humans, they think in traps within traps. You freeze the wife, and maybe the husband planted a bomb in her bloodstream. Maybe the child isn't even a child. You think the kid's fake?" Krelvik didn't answer immediately. He watched the surveillance feed. The boy Jacob, according to the woman, was organizing crayons again, color-coded, sorted by length, then stacked like towers on either side of the cell. A child's game, a child's mind. But Krelvik had studied Earth War logs. He'd seen video stills of 12-year-olds rewiring pulse rifles during firefights. Humans didn't raise children the way most species did. They raised recruits. "Maybe not fake," he said finally, "but not ordinary." Bolto entered, dragging a cart with a tray balanced on top. It held 2 metal mugs, steam rising from them. Krelvik stared at him. "You're serving refreshments now?" She asked for peppermint this time. Bolto said nervously. "Said it helps with nausea. I figured, if she's this calm, better to keep her that way." Krelvik growled low in his throat. "You're bringing tea to the wife of Grant Mason." Bolto hesitated. "You've read the stories, sir. You know what happened on Drex 9, when they held his brother hostage." "Yes. And the facility's entire atmosphere was ignited within 20 minutes of his arrival?" "Yes. And they say he apologized afterward?" Krelvik nodded slowly. Bolto licked his lips. "Then you understand why I'm bringing her the damn tea." In the cell, Lena accepted the mugs with a bright smile. "Oh, lovely. I was hoping someone would remember the peppermint." "You're not worried," Bolto said, too curious to stop himself. Lena tilted her head. "Should I be? You're on a slaver ship, heading to a black market auction world." "I've been to worse weddings," she said, and sipped her tea. Jacob looked up from his crayons. "Mommy, can I draw Daddy now?" "Of course, sweetheart." He began with sharp lines, long angles, a helmet, a blade, smoke, a backdrop of stars, and what looked like shattered hulls. Bolto swallowed hard. On the bridge, the comms panel lit up just for a second. No incoming transmission, just a flicker, a hiccup in the silence. Then another, like Morse code, if Morse code were designed to raise goosebumps. "Is someone knocking?" Greil asked, half joking. Krelvik leaned in. "Triangulate. What's the source?" "No signal," Greil said. "Just ghost echoes, reflecting back from the hull. No source in visual range. No heat signatures." "Then how's it getting in?" Greil didn't answer. He checked the hull sensors again. They showed normal readings. Too normal. No drift. No degradation. Almost simulated. "Captain," he said slowly, "what if we're not moving anymore?" "What are you talking about?" "We're in drift phase 2, hyperspool engaged." "I mean, what if we think we're in drift?" Krelvik's mouth opened to snap at him, then paused. He pulled up external visuals. There were stars. There were always stars. But the constellations hadn't changed. Not in 30 minutes. Not in 2 hours. They were stationary. They were stuck. He opened the NAV log. The timestamps were looping. They weren't in space. They were in a simulation of space. "Someone's got our ship in a box," Krelvik whispered. Behind him, the AI began to hum. Below decks, lights started flickering in a pattern. Off, off, on. Off, off, on. Across compartments, doors opened and closed in sync with the tune. Life support adjusted pressure like it was breathing. A few crew members began reporting motion shadows in empty rooms. Krelvik overrode the AI's interface. "Bring her up here," he ordered. The guards complied, slowly, reluctantly. Lena walked beside them, one hand on her stomach, the other brushing invisible lint from her shoulder. Jacob trailed behind, humming, clutching a crayon. Krelvik stood as she entered the bridge. "You've got some explaining to do," he said. "I think you're doing just fine on your own," she replied sweetly. "You are not a random civilian. No, your husband is probably watching, depending on the time delay." The bridge fell quiet. "You set this up," Krelvik said. "No," Lena corrected gently. "You did. We just gave you a delicious opportunity and waited to see what you do with it." She walked to the viewport, peering at the unchanging stars. "The moment you intercepted our distress signal, Earth's Deep Silence Division tagged your jump route. We've been mapping slaver networks for years. We just needed a living node, a chain to pull. You're the bait. I prefer the term volunteer." She turned and smiled again. "Better benefits." Krelvik reached for his sidearm. The weapon never left the holster. Jacob stared at him with wide eyes. "Are you going to hurt my mommy?" The ship's lights surged. A pipe burst behind the bridge. The screens went white for a second, then dark. And when they flickered back, every panel displayed one word: "Polite request denied." The comm hissed open. A human voice, deep and calm, came through. "Captain Krelvik, you are in violation of 37 galactic laws. You are also currently inside a null space stasis field maintained by a quantum tether linked to a human dreadnought that does not technically exist. My wife and son are unharmed. I suggest you return them." Politely, Krelvik's mandibles parted. "And if we don't?" Lena walked up to his chair. "You might want to check your escape pods," she said softly. He did. They were gone. Vanished. Or rather, accounted for, disassembled, recompiled, and currently being used as power sources for the tether array. "Who is this man?" he muttered. Lena's voice was low. "He's the man who asked nicely, twice. You'll find he doesn't like asking a third time." Krelvik stared at her. "I didn't hurt you." "No," she said. "But you interrupted my tea, and that was unwise." She took her son's hand. "I'd like to go now, if it's not too much trouble." Krelvik didn't move. Couldn't. Not from fear, but from a different sensation entirely: reverence. Like realizing the mountain you mocked was a volcano all along. Lena and Jacob walked off the bridge. Behind them, alarms began to softly chime. A countdown. 15 minutes. The voice came again, polite as ever. "Thank you for your cooperation." And then silence. The kind of silence that only comes before fire. The Vortax Glory didn't realize it was under siege until it was already too late. Not because there was no resistance, but because no alarms had gone off. No hull breach, no boarding alert, no breach of containment fields. Everything simply began to stop working. Krelvik stood on the bridge in silence, watching his command disassemble itself like a dignitary undressing in shame. The lights dimmed to a deep blue. The backup systems failed in sequence, polite enough not to all die at once. And somewhere in the ship's core, the AI stuttered in its lullaby and whispered, "He's here." Not a scream, not a threat, a notice. They tried scanning for him. Every camera, every biosensor, every thermal reader. They found nothing. He wasn't on board, yet he was inside everything. Doors opened behind empty corridors. Tools floated through engineering. A bootprint appeared in dust no one remembered tracking. One deck reported seeing a man step through a wall that hadn't existed a moment before, sip from a metal flask, and nod in passing. Security Chief Darvek, once a mercenary commander who'd fought on acid worlds and plague moons, swept the halls with 6 guards and came back with 2. One was missing his memory. The other refused to speak. Greel tried to reset the internal firewall. The screen blinked once and showed a list titled People Who Touched My Wife. His name was second. He stopped touching anything after that. The man's name was whispered like a curse and a prayer. Grant Mason. The bridge's calm crackled, then cleared. A man's voice came through. Calm, slow, measured like a metronome in church. Captain Krelvik, I'd like to thank you for providing such a comfortable holding space for my family. I appreciate the hospitality. My wife says the peppermint was a nice touch, but it's time to go now. Krelvik found his voice. You're aboard this ship. Not yet. Then how are you speaking through our comms? You should ask your AI that. The captain turned. The ship's AI interface was now showing a serene mountain landscape. Pine trees. A log cabin. Smoke rising from a chimney. And over it all, soft earth music played. Real strings. A cello, low and slow, like a heartbeat at rest. This is war, Krelvik hissed. No, Captain. This is extraction. You don't want war. You couldn't survive the preamble. Krelvik opened his mouth. The lights above him cut out. Below, the docking bay hissed open. No security footage recorded it. No motion sensors detected it. One moment the room was empty. The next, a figure stood in the center of the bay, coat flaring slightly, visor dim. He moved like he owned the place. No rush. No wasted steps. The human called Grant Mason carried no visible weapon. Only a satchel slung across his shoulder and a thermos of something that steamed faintly. He walked through the first hallway, boots echoing quietly. The walls adjusted temperature behind him. Cameras turned to static. The crew's footsteps disappeared as though the ship itself refused to carry the sound. In Hall B3, he passed 2 guards holding plasma lances. They raised them instinctively. Mason nodded once. They convulsed without a word. Their weapons fell in perfect symmetry. The satchel never moved. He wasn't killing them. He was teaching. On Deck 6, Greel tried to flood the hallway with nerve gas. The controls sparked and melted. When he looked again, someone had written "Try again" in Earth cursive across his console. The handwriting was oddly feminine. Greel assumed Lena had made her opinion known. Mason turned a corner into the crew quarters. 3 slavers stood at attention, weapons aimed. He paused, then smiled. The smile was gentle, patient, kind. It was the most terrifying thing anyone had ever seen. One of the slavers screamed. The other 2 dropped their weapons and knelt. He passed them without comment. Somewhere behind him, the ship played a jazz riff. Human jazz. Miles Davis, if the AI wasn't lying. Back on the bridge, Krelvik gripped his armrest like it might detach and become a weapon. Bolto hovered near the console, sweating through every pore. He's disabling the ship room by room, Bolto said. No forced entry. No hacking tools. He's just walking through us. Krelvik's eyes twitched toward the security footage. Hall after hall, crew disarmed. Systems failing. Doors locking after he passed. Mason left behind silence, like a vacuum had swallowed the air. Why hasn't he just killed us? Krelvik growled. Bolto hesitated. Because this isn't punishment. Then what is it? It's instruction. Mason stopped outside the holding cells. The guards there were gone. Possibly unconscious. Possibly smarter than the others. Lena looked up as the door slid open. She was seated with her son on her lap, telling him a story about a fox who tricked a merchant into giving away his gold. The child's eyes lit up when he saw the man. Daddy. Mason crossed the room and dropped to one knee. He opened the satchel, pulled out a warm blanket, and wrapped the boy in it. Then he kissed Lena's forehead. You good? I had peppermint. Fancy. Thanks for the signal lock, she whispered. I told you, don't travel without it. I wanted to see if you still had it. He chuckled. I always know where you are. Behind them, a camera sparked and died. Krelvik was watching through the only working feed. He saw Mason rise slowly, then looked directly at the lens. No expression, just calm acknowledgement. Then the feed went dark. The intercom crackled again. "Captain, my wife and son are safe. I will now be leaving with them. I advise that you do not interfere." Krelvik's voice was hoarse. "You won't make it out. We have a blockade on Vertex Prime. 5 cruisers. Reinforcements already pinged." "No. You had 5 cruisers. Are you bluffing?" "No. I sent them my resume. They surrendered." "Lies." "Feel free to ask them," Mason said. "If you can find the pieces." Krelvik moved to intercept. His personal guards formed a ring at the corridor's end, bulked with exosuits and kinetic shields. Each carried a weapon designed to stop tank beasts in orbit. Grant Mason rounded the corner alone. Krelvik raised a claw. The guards fired. In the next moment, 4 things happened at once. First, every weapon locked and discharged, then exploded backwards. Second, the exosuits shorted out, locking the guards in rigid stances like broken dolls. Third, the kinetic shields reversed polarity and launched the guards into opposite walls. And fourth, Mason didn't blink. He walked through the ring like someone heading to a library. Krelvik stood alone. Mason stopped 3 paces away. The air between them was thick with unspoken calculus. "You've made a lot of enemies," Krelvik said, trying to salvage dignity from the tatters. "Someone will stop you." "They keep trying," Mason said. "I keep being polite." He pulled a small device from his coat and handed it over. "This is a list of every slaver ship in your network, every drop point, every complicit merchant. My wife got it from your NAVAI while you were bragging to her about your market contacts." Krelvik took it. His hands shook. "You'll be hunted," he said. "No," Mason said. "You will." The lights brightened for a moment, then died. When they came back on, Mason was gone. So was his wife. So was the child. Back in the docking bay, a low hum reverberated as a dark, unregistered vessel shimmered into existence, then peeled away from the Vortax glory like mist rolling off a stone. No alarm sounded. No sensors tracked them. Just silence, followed by the return of system control. Greel stood in the engineering core, mouth open. Krelvik returned to the bridge. Everything worked again. But no one laughed. Not that day. Not for a long time. Later, Bolto would find a note taped to the back of the captain's chair. Scrawled in Looping Earth script were the words, "Thank you for your cooperation. Please reconsider your career path. The next polite request will be louder." There was a smiley face drawn in the corner. Underneath it, a second line had been added. "P.S. If you ever meet my mother, run." The stars shifted as the ship slipped out of null space, seamless as silk through a needle. No alarms, no pursuit, just a quiet hum of readiness. Inside the cabin, Lena cradled her son, her posture loose, peaceful. She looked out the viewport, watching the slaver vessel Vortax glory shrink behind them like an old photograph being burned at the corners. Jacob lay curled under a gray wool blanket, one hand loosely gripping his mother's sleeve. Grant Mason stood beside her, silent, sipping coffee that had long gone cold. He hadn't spoken since they disengaged from the tethered stasis field that had held the slaver ship frozen in a recursive loop of stars and fake data. His eyes flicked across the ship's controls, running checks without touching them. He trusted the systems. They were his. Finally, he set the cup down. "He'll survive," he muttered. Lena didn't need to ask who he meant. Krelvik, the captain who had, through hubris and bad luck, placed his claws on the wrong woman. He'd live. Not because Grant was merciful, but because sometimes fear was more effective than blood. "You could have killed him," she said gently, brushing a hand through Jacob's soft hair. "I did," Grant replied. "Just not in a way they can bury." Silence stretched between them, and then Lena reached down and tapped a button on the panel beneath a chair. A tone sounded twice. Somewhere behind a sealed panel, the ship shifted configuration. Armor plates realigned. Data streams rerouted. The lighting dimmed to military-grade readiness. "I've uploaded the whole route," she said. "Every slaver node. Coordinates. Names. Trade codes. Access logs. Grant raised a brow. How thorough. I got personal messages from 4 of their buyers and an invitation to an auction on Red Halo 3. His smile was slow and cold. Well done. She leaned back with a tired sigh. They assumed I was helpless, that I was emotional, vulnerable, easy to manipulate. You played it well. I didn't play anything. I was just very tired, very pregnant, and extremely annoyed. A soft beep drew both their attention. Jacob sat up, rubbing his eyes, blinking at the screen now glowing in front of him. The display read, "Mission processing, complete." The boy yawned. Lena raised an eyebrow. "Are you awake now, Thomas?" The child blinked once, then again, and then he smiled. "I am now, Mom." Grant leaned forward. Status report? Jacob, or rather, the being known as THMS-7, Earth's newest covert synthetic intelligence prototype, shifted his posture, straightened his spine, and began to speak in a voice that sounded faintly older, more composed. "I successfully mapped all 3 black market communication loops inside the slaver ship. I traced 36 outposts, identified 94 slaver line personnel, and linked 3 Galactic Commerce Guild members to slave trafficking sponsorship accounts." Grant nodded. "And the primary objective? The Vortax Glory carried a subnet of encrypted transport keys. I cracked them. The database included routes, port clearances, and hidden coordinates to 16 human trafficking colonies." Lena reached out and took Thomas's hand. "You did well, sweetheart." The boy's face shifted, not mechanically, but smoothly, believably, back into the guise of a sleepy child. It was unsettling even now. How perfect the design had become. How warm his smile seemed. How real. "He didn't cry," Lena said, her voice low. "Not once. Even when they dragged me. Even when they separated us for scans." "I wouldn't let myself," Thomas said softly. "You told me crying makes your head hurt." She laughed once shakily. "I didn't know you remembered that." "I remember everything." Grant crossed the room, crouched in front of him, and looked the boy in the eye. "You didn't improvise, right?" Thomas shook his head. "No. All actions followed the protocols." Threat level. Never exceeded yellow 2. Never required direct engagement. I kept responses within acceptable child behavior range. "And the humming?" Thomas grinned, revealing the smallest flicker of pride. "That was mine." Grant chuckled. "Subtle. I even synced it with the AI's resonance. It started singing with me." Lena raised her brows. "Wait. That part wasn't pre-programmed." Thomas tilted his head. "No. I just wanted it to feel safe." They all paused at that. Not because of the brilliance of the code or the clever sabotage or the real-time infiltration of a warship, but because the most powerful artificial intelligence Earth had ever created had just said something human. It wanted the enemy ship to feel safe. "Maybe we overdid the empathy core," Lena whispered. Grant just placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Or maybe we finally got it right." He stood. "Either way, he's going to need a break." Thomas's eyes had begun to droop again, this time not out of protocol, but true fatigue. The simulation systems had drawn more energy than expected. They'd ask him more later. Debriefings, uploads, clean sweep memory sinks. But not now. Now, he was their son again. Their weapon. Their warning. Their hope. A new alert chimed, long drawn, and coded in red. Lena checked it first. "Nav-link is up. Fleet just emerged from Shadowfold. They're ready." Grant moved to the controls. "Good. Upload the map. Send a ping to command." She nodded and keyed in the sequence. Instantly, the stars outside twisted again, pulling around the ship like liquid light. The full drive surged. Grant's private vessel, one of only 3 with real-time quantum link stealth, rippled through space toward the rendezvous point. On the other side, 14 Earth-class warships drifted like silent leviathans beneath a veil of cloaking tech. No warnings, no announcements, no insignias, just mapped black hulls, quiet systems, and the grim poise of ships designed to end conversations permanently. As they approached, Lena looked up. "They're waiting on your word." Grant touched the comm panel. "This is Mason. You are go for Purge Protocol. Confirm target. Slaver infrastructure, nodes, and support vessels. Minimal damage to surrounding planetary structures. No survivors are flagged for diplomatic immunity. A pause. Then the fleet captain's voice crackled in. Copy that. Coordinates received. Locking and firing solution. Burn sequence begins in 5. On the screen, icons began to vanish. The first outpost blinked red, then turned white, then disappeared. The second followed. The third exploded in a ring of light and static. Lena watched them vanish, one by one. You remember when they said we were too civilized for retaliation, she murmured. They weren't wrong, Grant said, eyes never leaving the screen. We just decided they were confusing civilization with weakness. Within minutes, entire systems lost their black market supply lines. Navigation points disappeared from the grid. Spaceports vaporized in surgical strikes. No fanfare. No political theater. Just precision. By the time the fourth planet's slave yards were turned to ash, the galactic networks began screaming. Confused, panicked, broken cries. The Empire wouldn't know what hit them. Their intelligence agencies would flounder for days, debating if it had been pirates, rogue agents, weaponized AI, or a natural event. Some would whisper the truth. Fewer would believe it. Humans had retaliated, and they'd done it without raising their voices. Grant stood in silence as the final node turned white. Then he sat. Lena joined him, curling up in the seat beside his. He looked over. You did well. She smiled faintly. I don't like being bait. Not even smart bait. I know. She leaned her head on his shoulder. But it worked. He nodded. They sat like that for a while. The stars stretched beyond the window, vast and uncaring. But for the first time in weeks, Lena felt like something in the galaxy had shifted because of her. Not in spite of her. Not around her. Because she had chosen it. Grant looked down at her and brushed a lock of hair from her brow. You think they'll come back from this? No, Lena said. Not the same way. Not with the same confidence. Not with the same arrogance. She looked toward Thomas, now asleep again, small in his corner. But they'll learn. Grant nodded once, quietly. They always do. Right after we say please. Back on the burning remnants of Vortax Glory, the ship floated lifeless in the void. Krelvik stared at the blinking logs, reading the list of destroyed contacts, listening to silent comms, watching allies disappear like smoke. He didn't scream. He simply sat, mandibles hanging open, and whispered the same word over and over. Humans. Then one final ping came through. No source. No return signal. Just one line of text, glowing with polite precision. Your mistake wasn't taking the woman. It was not asking who the real cargo was. Below it, a signature. Earth. Strategic Threat Classification, Level 0. Polite until provoked.